Hi, this is Paul Neale, and in this video, I'm going to try and describe a way of painting complex surfaces um, without having to use a 3D paint application and only texturing the object using tileable textures or trim sheet textures. So this is our complex object. This is the sort of thing we can use for game development. So, in this case, it's relatively low res. It's a complex object in that it has, many curved surfaces and, pieces sticking out of it for all the roots and everything. Um, and this is something you typically go and have to unwrap, take into Substance, and paint into 3D. Now, what's the issue there? What we'd end up with is a unique texture map for every object like this that we would need. And so in doing so, what we'd end up with is a lot of texture space that would be necessary to texture a lot of different types of assets. We could have downed logs, we could have growing trees, and whatnot. But what if we could just reuse the same texture over and over again? And that's what's happened here. If you notice, you don't see seams in my textures. What you do see is a little bit of oddities in places. You can see it's kind of blurring together in some locations here, but overall, this works actually very well with textures that are a little more random like this, not so specific, kind of noisy type textures. You can see that we've got details like the rings in the tree, and the meat of the inside of the tree is actually a different texture than the bark of the tree. But again, there's no seams to be seen that really jump out at you. So what this is using is only two different textures. It's this one here, which would be, you could probably use it as a 256 or even a 512 in game. Right now it's a 1024, as well as this one here. Got more room here to paint some more elements if I need them, other types of end grain maybe. This is the outer bark. This is the inner meat of the tree, and these are the rings. You can see I've painted these in, quickly and very painterly sort of fashion to get the look and feel that I was after. So how do I go about doing this without getting seams? We're going to explore that on this copy that has no UVs and no maps. We'll get started. So to get this started, let's get a material starting to be built. So I have the existing material, and this is the material tree currently in 3ds Max, in Slate. It's using OSL nodes and a physical material, and that's what's currently texturing this object here. We'd have to replicate this type of setup over in a game engine, for instance, Unreal Engine, where I've ported this over to, and it has the same type of setup working with it to make it function. So I'm just going to start with a physical material so we can see it, and I'm going to assign it to that selection. Now we're going to need, a couple textures to get us started. So I'm going to drop in these. Now I can drop these in, but when you drop them in, they make bitmap nodes, the old bitmap nodes. What I'm going to do is instead, I'm going to go to OSL and I'm going to use the bitmap lookup nodes. And so I'm going to grab the bitmap lookup node for the two different maps to get started. Um, these two, and we'll come back and we'll get um, the normal maps next. I'm going to grab both of those, hit H just to collapse them because I don't need all of that info there. Now you may ask, how on earth do you hook them up? Well, if you just click on the green sort of right or left and hold for a second, it'll open all the outputs. I'm going to drag over and just, you can click on the output or click anywhere and connect it up, and it'll connect up. So I'm going to drop on this first one, just the bark, and I'm going to go and take the roughness all the way up so that we have it rough. Now there's no UVs on this, so it doesn't look very good. Let's go and start putting some UVs on here. I'm going to stick an unwrap modifier on it. One of the things I always like to do to start with is I'm just going to go Control A, select everything, and make sure I hit Quick Planar Map. Now, I'd already removed the UVs using the UV Remove tool. It has to be done in a mesh, or you can actually go to Tools and you can go to Channel Info and delete the channel info for the UVs if you like. That's another way of doing it. But I'll tend to just go in, grab all the polygons, Control A, and then just hit Quick Planar Map. It removes any seams that it may have to begin with. We want to get rid of all of those. So let's start breaking out the pieces that we're going to, sort of need as seams and whatnot. We can do it one of two ways. We can do it with edge loops, which is pretty handy. So if I take an edge loop, and you can see that's gone and done some really crazy stuff right here. I'm just going to get rid of this so we don't accidentally break it here. And be very particular. I see students of mine often not paying attention around the model when they do things like this, end up putting cuts all over the place. So with that done, broken, I'm going to open the, or broken, it's outlined here. I'm just going to go and say break, and it'll give me a seam at that point, and I can break the seam, or you can go down. I think there's a seam tool. So I just tend to do the break, and I forget how to. Yeah, everybody gets sort of workflows going, so it's broken up. Now the next one we want to do is sort of break the bottom off. Might be a good idea as well. So let's do that. I don't think this is going to loop in any stretch of the imagination, so we could do this with the faces. Now, if you notice, I've also turned off the shade selected faces, which is F2. So I like to see the texture underneath when I'm working. So I've got that. I'm just going to grow that selection, and I'm just going to go and say break again. And you'll see we're starting to break off some pieces. So we could use the same kind of method and grab whole chunks here. Now, if you notice it didn't get the underneath, make sure you turn off the ignore back facing in the UV unwrap tool. So I'm just going to go in and grab that, make sure I've got what I want, and I'm going to go break, and I'm going to go around and finish doing that to all of them. So now that I have all of the roots kind of broken off, I'm going to find a location to break this up so that I have the sides broken as well. And I'm just going to sort of find kind of a natural seam here. Maybe this one here, down this way, and break that. And then I'll go ahead and break it. Maybe, I guess here might be a good idea over on this side. Well, I can usually generally be fairly even, and that'll come down to this point here, and we'll say break there. And we should now have multiple pieces. Now we also want to break the top edge off, so I'm just going to double click on an edge loop around the top here. So we want to separate this inside from the outside. So that probably is a good plan right there. And I'm just going to say break there as well so that we've broken that off. Now we'll go about flattening this out. We're going to have to still do some breaks along the bottoms of the roots to make sure they can flatten, and we'll go ahead and flatten those out. Okay, I've finished breaking these up. I've broken along the bottoms so that the roots can, flatten out nicely. We have the sides broken up into a sort of a front and back panel, the interior piece, front and back panel, the interior here where the rings will be, and the bottoms being broken out. Now, realistically, none of this bottom stuff's really necessary. We're not going to see it most of the time, but just in case we wanted this uprooted, sort of tilted on its side or something, maybe you would want to put some other texture on the bottom down here, but we're not going to do that in this tutorial. Over in the unwrap window, I'm just going to go Control A, select everything, and I'm going to use the peel options here and just say peel. The new unfold is fantastic, so it's now unfolded everything for us. We want to show the texture just so that we know what we're looking at. So we're going to put that, for whatever reason, it comes up as map output selector. And here's that texture on here. So we're going to texture the whole thing with this right now and not be concerned with the inside and outside, because you'll see how that comes up in a second. So with this then, and I'm just going to go ahead and isolate that. With all of that, let's start breaking these out into some pieces that make some sense. We'll start with probably the side panels, which are these. So I'm going to be selecting by element, and I'm going to grab these. and we'll work with these one at a time. Now, it really doesn't matter whether or not you're in the UV space or not. It's irrelevant because it's just constantly tiled wherever you go, right? That's just sort of the default space there. So what I'm going to do then is rotate this to be the right size. I may as well use the freeform mode. I'm going to pull it out and scale it until I start getting the size of texture that I want. Now you notice again, I could care less about the UV space. It's irrelevant. It really doesn't matter. So I want to get this to be the right size to be able to get the texture starting to look like the kind of scale that I'm after. Now you can also see it's all on crazy angles here as well. So we can start straightening that out a little bit just using the UV paintbrush. Now you've got the outside, which is control, inside strength, which is shift, and the overall, there's sort of a, what do you call it with the, I think it's holding down Alt. I think it does like a relax kind of thing or something. So what I'm going to do then is just start pulling some of this and trying to straighten up some of this mess a little bit so that I get the, um, you know, the grain of the wood going in the direction that I want. Now, what's nice is, especially when you're working with game models, they tend to be lower res, so you don't have these crazy poly counts to deal with. It's always easier to unwrap something at lower reses, and then if you needed higher reses, then go ahead and up res it, later, sort of thing. So as we get that straightened out, the other tool I like to use to help kind of straighten out some of this to ensure that it looks, right, because this starts becoming a little sort of, like tapping your head and rubbing your stomach, or is it the other way around? It's easier to go and use the tweak and view. And if you do tweak and view, then you can grab the vertices and you can start pushing them around. So you just need to kind of get close to the vertex of the corner of the polygon that you want to grab. And you can start pushing those around to try and make sure that you've got them going. You don't have too many crazy. You can see where that's kind of warping on me. I can push those around here and try and fix some of that. Same thing with up here. Let's straighten these out. Just make sure it doesn't look terrible. Again, this is it's a pretty generic kind of texture that's going on here. So that doesn't look too bad. Something like that, I guess. And it's starting to look pretty good. So that one's good. So now what I want to do is I want to go and do that to all of the rest and get them all about the same kind of scale that I'm looking for. So I'll head off and do that. So what I did is I flattened out the rest. Now you'll notice they're just kind of scattered everywhere. It really doesn't matter once again because UV space just tiles infinitely. So who cares? I've just simply stretched them out to be the right size and generally rotated. Looks like that one's upside down, but generally rotated them so they're the same and done a little bit of tweaking just to make sure they kind of, feel like they're flowing in the right directions and whatnot. So I've got the sides, together. And if we take a look at the end result of this, you can see that we've got um, a case where there's seams everywhere. That's to be totally expected. But what's interesting is when you look at the sides here, if we're careful, it looks like I've got a twist in this one. You can actually completely hide the seams in the sides as well. So let's do that and just fix this seam here. I'm just going to go in and tweak tweak in view, and we can go down and just probably just get this to look like it belongs together and nobody would ever know. So I bet you if that's, the way that's set up right now, I'm just going to turn off the shade selected and I'm going to hide the seams in the tool here. So map seams, you can see that that seam's pretty much gone. So it's certain map types. You don't even need to worry about trying to hide the seam. It hides itself. You can, good luck seeing that in game. And then over here, the same thing, there's a seam down here, but if we do a little bit of tweaking again and just, consider straightening some of this out, we can probably get it so, we'll never, ever be able to see that seam again. And again, just sort of, sometimes it's also, in this case, bringing up some of the darks, run the darks into the darks. and you know, down, and all of a sudden the seam will just kind of vanish on us, and nobody will ever know. So, you know, now what to do at the next stage? We have the interior piece to deal with, and that's these chunks here. So it's these three pieces here are all going to go into those interior parts. So we need the correct map for that. This is a tileable map. For it, we're going to be using the trim sheet map. So we want to now make sure that when we're unwrapping onto very specific pieces in this case. This will tile side to side, but it's not going to tile up and down. So we got to be a little more careful here. But to do that, we're going to need the material itself. So I'm going to open up materials, and then I'm just going to take the color out into the base color of our trim sheet and just swap them out. Of course, this is going to make it look very odd. So with that said, let's go about fixing some of this. So we need to update this map. It'll tend not to always update. So I'm just going to go to pick texture and go in and find that texture on one of the materials. There we go, so we can see it. So this piece is going to be pretty obvious. I'm going to drop that in the middle somewhere, and then I'm going to scale it out so that it fits, something like that. And you can see now we've got the texture now. You know, it just kind of goes dark at the edges. Nobody's ever going to see that there's a seam in there either. Do we really need to worry about, you know, trying to hide that seam in there with the way this is going to come about? But now we've got these pieces. So we really want these pieces to be the right way up again. I think it's that way up. I'm going to scale it so it fits this to some degree again. And then we will also want to make sure that the meat of this is going up and down. So again, I can use the brush settings and just try and manipulate some of this into place so that we have something that looks a little better and makes a little more sense. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now that we have the interior part working, so we've got that the meat on the inside of the bark and the rings working, let's go ahead and blend these together. So just pop open the materials, and what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to blend these two textures together using a mask effectively. And the way we're going to do that is with an OSL math color, and we're going to use an interpolate node. Now, an interpolate node is a linear interpolation, and what it does is it just simply blends one value into another value in a linear way. You can think of it as simple as having two Photoshop layers and turning down the opacity on the top layer to 50%. You've blended the two layers now together in 50-50 effectively. Okay, so that's what this is going to do. So I'm going to take the output of our first map into the min and the output of our second map into the max. And then we're going to take the output of the linear interpolate into the base color. So what you're going to see by default now is the bottom texture, the min. The reason being is the input value is currently 0 or black. 1 being white, 0 being black. If I turn it up to white being 1, we've mixed them together so that we're seeing the bottom one entirely. You can think of this sort of, you know, backwards from Photoshop. The max is the top layer, min is the bottom layer. If we make it 100% opacity on the top layer, we're seeing 100% of that top layer. So that's kind of what we're doing here. I'll just leave that as black so we're seeing that one. What we want to do is we want to blend those together with Vertex colors. So I'm going to go Vertex Paint, add a Vertex Paint modifier. And I'm just going to quickly show the current colors that we can see here. So this is the current colors in the model. You can see I've collapsed in the UV unwrap. Don't need that one anymore, so we can add them as we want. So I like collapsing those as we go. We're not going to paint into the Vertex color channel. We're going to use channel 3. There's reasons for that in 3ds Max that are legacy because the Vertex, it's a long story that I haven't quite understood at this point, but use channel 3. We're going to need channels 1 and 2 of the map channels for UVs, and then channel 3 we're going to be using for colors. They're all just the same values. That's all they are, is values. What we want to do first, though, is fill it with black. We want this to come in at 000 RG and B. okay? And then we're going to mix these together. So I'm going to go back and just show the texture. And I'm going to go in and grab a node that is OSL UV coordinates UV channel. Now this UV channel return data from a UV channel. We want to return the data from channel 3 in this case, and that is map channel 3 that we're using here to paint into. Now we don't want all RGB. We just want one of the color values. We don't need all RGB, and in fact we're going to use R and G as two different masks because each channel is just a value from 0 to 1. So to do that, we're going to go into OSL math color components and into the input. You can see now we can split out the RGB values. So I'm going to take the R out into input in this case. I'll just hit H just to collapse that because we don't need to see any more of it. And we shouldn't see any difference here. Okay, so we're still seeing 100% of the bottom channel because we've made the top one transparent because it's 0 at this point. Okay, so if we now go in and start painting in color, in this case white, but we want to just go in color white because then we're painting into all our G and B channels. We only want to paint in the red channel because it's the only one we're concerned with, and we want to reserve the green and the blue we keep those black for now because we want to use the green later, and you'll see where we get that. So I'm going to turn up the red channel, go ahead to my paintbrush, and you can see now as I paint this in, what I'm doing is I'm effectively painting in white, or a value of 1, which now is showing up as red to us because we're looking at a red channel. But forget the fact that they're colors, okay? We're painting a value of 1 into the red channel. So with that being said, we can go around the model now and just start painting this in and ensure that we can see that ring down there. And one of the things you're going to have to be a little careful of is that you can end up painting through the other side, I've found. So I'll make the brush a bit smaller when I do the sides here. I find the size of the brush kind of matters. I'm probably still doing it anyways, and I'll just fix it in a second when we can take a look at what the actual colors are. So you can see as I paint the color around the outside here, it's now slowly showing me that interior map and hiding off the base map. So it's basically putting this on top here of it all. And again, we want to make sure that we're not showing anything through. So if we actually show it, you can see where we've started to paint into that in the outside here. So I'm just going to go back and paint a little black in here lightly, make sure that it is not coming all the way through because there's just no need for that. And make sure that's not affecting the other side either. And I'm kind of painting down on an angle to try not to affect it too much. So with that being said, we now have the interior working. So if we go back to the texture, you can see we see the meat and we see the rings in here. But we have seams, and we have seams everywhere, and we need to start correcting those seams. So that's going to be the next stage of working with this. So in this case, I'm just going to collapse this back down again. I don't need that Vertex paint. You could leave it in the stack if you like, but I tend to collapse everything as I go. So now what we need to do is we need to create a Band-Aid. And it literally is sort of a Band-Aid process. And I'll try and explain that. If we take and think about these two polygons side by side here as kind of sitting and looking at them on edge, we have a UV seam right here at this point where these two polygons are, in this case, separated by UV seam. So it's creating this UV seam for us. Well, what if we were to take another unwrap and we were to unwrap these two polygons with another unwrap across it? Okay, and what we'll do is we'll unwrap that onto the same texture so that there's actually an unwrap going across that seam. And you're going to say, well, isn't that just making a mess again? Sure it is. But what if we can then take and blend in this new UV. So effectively, it's sort of blended in like this, in a sense that this would be a value of 1, this would be a value of 0 and 0. So we're going to blend this Band-Aid off at the edges so that it becomes this mask. So right here over the seam, we just have a little patch of the texture here that just blends into the other side. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So let's take a look at how we go about doing that. We don't need our material editor again. What we need to do is do another unwrap. But in this unwrap, we're going to change it to map channel 2. So I'm going to ask us, do we want to move them or abandon? Just abandon. We don't need the UVs that are there. There shouldn't be any seams in this whatsoever. And now what we have to do is another unwrap on this all the way around. And we're going to break this into some interesting pieces again. So what we can do then is take anywhere there's a seam. Now there's a seam down the center here. There's a seam right here. So I'm going to go in and grab all of these. And in the editor, I'm just going to break those off for now. And in fact, I'm just going to go Control A and move everything out of my way here. And then just go back, element on, and grab the chunk I need. So that's going to be this piece here. Let's go about showing that texture again. So we should be able to see, it's going to be kind of a blend of the two at this point. If we don't want to see that, we can go into the pick texture and then we could just grab one of the textures if we want to be able to see it this way. So this obviously isn't working so well. It might actually, if we relax that, we might be able to get it to work fairly well. So we want to see this result in here now, which is what we're not. If I move this around, you can see it's not moving the UVs. So we need to be able to see this and understand what we're getting all the way around here. To do that, we're just going to do something temporary with our material. This is our material here, this OSL bitmap node. I'm just going to drag another copy of that out. And I'm going to replace the current tree with just it. So I'm only going to be seeing it on it. And then we want to actually change the UV input of this. So it takes the UV coordinates. So I'll just hit H so you can see it. So you can take the UV coordinates in here. And so I'm just going to grab just this one, and I'm going to change this to UV channel 2 and pipe that into the UV channels. So it's now retrieving UV channel 2 and showing us that texture. So you can see that texture is a disaster on here. It's not doing what we want. We're just concerned about this strip. So to fix that, we're going to have to do some breaks on here again. And I think if we do some natural seams again as to where we seamed it before, it might make some sense. So I'm going to grab that, and say break. And then I think over on the other side, we did it here, I think. And I'm just going to break it there, and we'll break it there. So with these now selected, I'm just going to go and unfold those again. No, I don't need all of them unfolded. I just need this one. And it's odd, if you're in the polygon mode, it'll respect what you have selected. So I'm going to grab these and I'm going to rotate those over. And again, these don't matter where they are. They're on a tileable texture. But we want to make sure that they have the same kind of scale of texture that we were using before. And of course, we also want to go in and make sure that we clean up and get them sort of bent into shape so that we have all of that looking like it's going in the direction that we would expect. And because the model has been modeled cleanly, it actually makes it easier to be able to unwrap things cleanly, because you can expect the polygons to be sort of more lined up and whatnot. So this is one of those cases where good modeling will make everything else better. So this isn't looking too bad. Let's just correct this one and get it on a better angle here. So these two strips look pretty good now. I flattened them out, and again, doesn't matter where they sit. We want to do one other strip, and that's across this top edge, because there's a seam between the inner meat and the outer bark. So same thing, let's go ahead and pick some polygons here. And I'm just going to go ahead and maybe get a row all the way around like this. And we're going to be able to blend that top edge together and see, maybe we don't need all of those. I think we might be able to hide it just with that row there. So that might be the best bet. We'll try that. I'll just grab all of these and break them off and then flatten those out. Same thing, we're going to have to put a break point in these. So I'm going to break it there. And again, probably on the other side, wherever that other seam was, just to keep the seams in the same place. And then I'll go about flattening these out so that we've got them, as we need them. And again, we're looking to try and get the grain, kind of go in the direction that we need, so we can look at polygons like this here and determine whether or not that should really be at a different angle. Maybe it needs to get pulled up more. Again, you can go and pull this vert by vert if you wanted. Yeah, let's see what happens when I do this, because it's all going to blend together so nice. You're probably not going to see it, but we want to make sure the grain's about the same size as what we're doing around the bottom, so it all kind of fits together nicely. So now with this, those pieces are unwrapped into, in this case, the channel 2. So they're into channel 2. I'm just going to collapse that down to editable poly again. We don't need that. Now what we have is the same problem. We're going to go plug our original texture tree back in. So we're going to have those seams showing up, but now we've done that patch, and that patch is going to be this one here. So the way we're going to blend this in now is we're going to take another interpolate node. So we're going to go and grab another math color interpolate. And we're going to take the output of the first interpolate, and that is going to go into the min value of the new interpolate. This one is out on UV channel 2 because we set it to map channel 2. And we're going to take the output here and we're going to plug that into max. And then of course we're going to take max out into the base color. So we need to now control this input here, and we're going to control the input with the green channel. So we're going to go in and grab green, and we're going to plug that into input. So we want to paint into that new channel. So let's go and add another Vertex paint modifier. Now here's the trick. When you paint with this, so I'm going to open up the color, and let's say we pull up green. When I paint, I'm going to be painting back into the red and the blue again. And you're going to say, well, that's no good because we want the red, the white colors on the inside. So what we do is we change it from a normal layer to an additive layer. So if we're adding 0 in red and blue to the red and blue channels, we're not going to be changing their value at all. We only want to add values into the green channel. So now we can go about painting into that green channel as that layer. And we want to be painting, into channel 3, of course, as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint along that seam. You can see that seam just suddenly vanishes. Now, the way we've done it, we don't want to be painting outside of our paint area. So we want to just follow that seam. So you might want the edges on. But as we paint into that area, it's going to start blending together those seams, and we're going to hide them off reasonably well. So you can see that they just start getting hidden away here. And if we overpaint too much and we go too far, we can just paint a little bit of black back in, put our green back up, and make sure we hit only those areas that we want to hit. And you can see the seam just kind of blends and disappears on us and vanishes it with the band-aid that's being put on there. Enough sort of blend in it. Again, you could have even done the unwrap further out on multiple sort of polygons going out from it, and you could, kind of help blend it even more. But again, how much does it need to be hidden, from view? So this now is producing a product that has no seam around there. Now I seem to have a seam there, and I'm not sure why. I'm gonna have to go back. Oh, that's the seam that comes down with this edge one here. That's kind of, I can't see it. You can play around with that and hide it. And then the same thing's got to happen up top here. We want to blend these ones together. So this is going to be a pretty small brush. We really only want to paint right on the seam here, and we don't want anything else to get painted. So you can just paint right along that seam and resolve it in that area as well. So there you have it. You have effectively a nice, clean, you know, looking model with what appears to be no seams and a nice generic tileable texture. We can then output this and we can have it in engine. Now we can use that third map channel if we wanted in something like Unreal as this blend, but you might want to have it in the color channel. Part of the problem with the color channel in Max is it for whatever reason won't display in real time. It'll work, but it won't display in real time. So it's really hard to see what you're doing. So if we want to see it, what we can do is go into Tools, Channel Info. There's our third channel. So there's our map channel 3. And you can see there's the Vertex color channel. So I'm going to take this channel and go and say copy over to the Vertex channel color channel and say paste and paste into this channel. And you can see that now it has the num verts. It's now updated it. So it has the same data in it. So if we wanted to output this to a game engine, we could actually remove the map channel 3 so that we don't import that and simply use that color channel that is the actual Vertex color channels. But there you go. There's a fix, and that is something we've been doing in 3D for, I don't know, 30 odd years to correct issues. Looks like I have a problem with UVs right up top here I need to fix, and then this model is ready to go out to game. And just the only thing it has on it is two very simple textures. We can do the exact same inputs, by the way, by copying this down and do the exact same thing, but change the input textures to be our normal maps. And of course, then plug this into normal map nodes. But again, if we are going out to a game engine, we wouldn't even have to worry about this in Max. We just need to worry that it actually looks the way we would expect. There you go.